Sarah Riando. I'm here with Elliot Bowden.
Hi, I'm Elliot.
We're both librarians at Webster University, and our librarians are designated to work with certain academic programs. For instance, I work with the School of Communications, and Elliot works with the School of Education. So you can contact any of us for general research help, but we also have librarians that are experts on doing research in your specific field if that's necessary. And really, if there's one thing that you should take away from your time with us today, it's that we're here to help you and that we can make your life a lot easier. Librarians are research experts, but also very friendly and helpful. And we know a lot of strategies and tricks to get you through any point in your research. We usually recommend that if you're doing research for about 20 minutes and you're not getting anywhere, that's when you call us. So today we're going to cover all of the steps in conducting your literature review. Often the most difficult step is just understanding what it is that you need to meet all the requirements of your assignments. So we'll discuss that first. And we'll also talk about using library resources for your research and strategies for overcoming problems that you might run into. Even the phrase literature review can sound a little scary, especially if it's your first lit review. But really what you're doing is finding out what research has been done on your topic and painting a picture of what we know on that subject. This is useful to you for a few reasons. As you progress in your academic career and grow as a student and a researcher, you move away from trying to find an article that simply answers your question and then writing a paper that explains it. You've moved on to writing a paper that will answer your question. To ask the right questions, you need to know what has already been answered. And in order to add to this collection of knowledge on your subject, you might ask questions that no one has ever thought to ask, and that's the exciting part. You also don't want to repeat research that's already been done, and for that reason, a literature review can save you a lot of time and disappointment. Your lit review should provide the reader with an overview of what we know, or what we think we know, about your topic. It should also tell your reader what we don't know about your topic. And by explaining that no one has asked your research question and why your question needs to be asked and how it will fit into the research that's already been done, you're justifying your research. You're telling us why it's worthwhile. Before you get started, you need to make a plan and prepare for things that might not go exactly as planned, which is certainly okay, and sometimes it's even encouraged. Make sure that you understand what your instructor wants from your literature review and contact with any questions so that they can clarify for you. Then you need to know what it is that you want to research, and usually you'll start with a general idea that might change over time. We call this a working topic. We also want to know what kind of sources you want, even if you don't have an idea of what they might tell us. This will help us know where to look. So to understand what is required, read your assignment carefully. Is your literature review part of a larger study? Maybe you're required to design a survey, or perhaps you want to define an organizational problem and suggest a solution. Is your literature standalone? Is it the only thing that you're writing? And this sets the stage for your actions. You're going to want to tell the reader what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Think about how much time and other resources you have and what you need to complete all the parts in your research assignment within the timetable that your instructor has given you. And if you're unsure, you can always talk to your instructor with questions. So selecting a good topic and research question is the foundation of good research. A good research question helps you add to the existing knowledge of your field and not just your own. We start with the question for a few reasons. A research question keeps us on track so we don't veer off topic. And it also helps keep our biases in check. When we ask a question, rather than setting out with a point that we want to prove, it prevents us from letting our own opinions get in the way. A question is also measurable. It helps us make more sense of our end product. It doesn't necessarily have to be a yes or no answer. Your result might be a maybe, or a handful of ways that one factor can influence another. Your answer might be, well, it's complicated, or even just that more research is needed. Keep in mind that your questions will likely change as you read the research available on your topic, and this is a good thing. Start with something interesting to you, maybe something useful in your workplace or at school, but as you find out more, you can often ask more interesting questions. And if you're interested in your topic, you're going to do better work. Here's an example of how you might use the research available on your topic to choose the direction that you can go with your research. We're interested in social media in the workplace. One article that we found addressed the effects of social media on sales personnel. But at the end of the article, the author discussed questions that their research was not able to answer. Our next step is to turn this direction into a question. We know that we are interested in social media and workplace productivity, but we need to ask a question that we would like to answer. In this case, it was which social media networks have certain effects on employee productivity. Step 3 is to search for actual research, not opinion. Writers on TV, internet blogs, newspapers, magazines will all offer opinions on why an event or behavior occurred. They may even mention a research study or do an unscientific poll, like this article in Adweek, to support their opinion. But a good research study provides details of who or what was studied and how. For example, surveys or controlled research conditions. To better support claims of correlation and causation, research studies will tell us their methodology and how and that you may want to use to study their topic. In order to do this, we need to know what kinds of sources are going to give us the best information and which ones will meet the requirements of your instructor. It's easy to find opinion on almost any topic these days. One of the great things about the internet is that everyone's voice can be heard. However, this is a situation where not all of these voices are equal. We want to make sure that your research is done by someone who's an expert in the field and can provide us with actual evidence to inform our questions and research. Opinions, like a poll or interview, can be useful in other areas of life or might even spark our interest to find out more about a topic, but they're not the sort of information that you want to actually be using as your sources in this lit review. And knowing that you're looking for scholarly research from the outset can save you a lot of time sifting through sources that you shouldn't use or that aren't acceptable to your instructor. If you're writing a full-length thesis or dissertation, it might be important to search all forms of the literature. While there may be sources of scholarly information, including books, government and organizational websites, theses and dissertations, conference papers even, today we're going to talk about professional or scholarly journals. Through the library, we can find articles that go through the peer-reviewed process when experts in the field give research a stamp of approval. But we can also show you some ways to make sure that your sources are peer-reviewed. But where do we find these journals? Some of them are available on the internet through resources like Google Scholar, but the easiest place to start is the library website. Our job at the library is to provide you with the information that you need to do your best work and ensure that you know how to access and use that information. And we have collections of these journal articles, our library databases, that allow you to search for articles that can relate to your field of study and meet the requirements of your assignment. So for instance, if you can only use articles that were published in the last few years, or articles that were written by a certain type of author, it's much easier to limit that information and sort through your results than doing a Google search and getting back hundreds of thousands of results. Trust us, using the library can save you a lot of time and hassle. On that note, remember to never pay for articles on the web. If you find an article with Google and are asked to enter your credit card number, don't enter it and don't give up on that article if you think it can be useful to you. You might already have access to the library, or we might be able to get you free access. So just bring that information back to us and we can get it for you. So we're going to go into our library databases with a question that we want to answer. And we can pick a few words that we're going to use to find our resources, and this will probably get us better results than using the whole question. But remember to be flexible. Start small and then adjust as you go. In this instance, we're going to see where we can get with social media and employee and then productivity. So now we need to get to the database. From the library homepage, library.webster.edu, we can select articles in databases. We have over 200 databases, so choosing a place to get started can be difficult. Think about what areas might have researchers who have studied your topic, which might not necessarily be the same as your major or the class for which you're writing your assignment. For example, there can be a lot of crossover with management and human resources with psychology and education when we research employee training. Just to keep things simple to demonstrate, we're going to look at management and human resources for our topic. Here you see a list of best bets, databases that are a good place to start for your topic. Don't be afraid to go beyond these. We're going to start with Business Source Complete, our largest management and human resources database. And you'll be prompted to log in to the first database you access. Type in your last name and your Webster ID number. Here are the keywords from our research question, and they're entered into the box. Remember, here's our first search, and it probably won't get us everything we want. It might get us nothing. Be prepared to revise, try different words with the same meaning, and different combinations of words. You might have to do a lot of little searches instead of one search. And if you get stuck, you can always call us. Once we enter our search, we can limit our results to make our next steps easier. For instance, you can select scholarly peer review. You can see that on the left side of your screen. And this will take out the newspapers, magazines, and other sources that aren't going to be acceptable for your assignment. You can also limit by date in instances when your research needs to be recent, which is most of the time. Here are 2 articles retrieved by our search. We can see subjects for these articles below the result, and this can be helpful for a few reasons. If you find an article that looks promising or an article with an aspect of it that's helpful, you can click on the subject, sort of like a hashtag on Instagram, and get more results like it. If you run into trouble finding the right words, these can be a good indicator of the language that researchers are using and can give you some ideas about keywords to try. Sometimes you can use the subject to find literature reviews. Looking at citations that other researchers have used can lead you to useful articles. But don't rely on this too much. as their topics will differ from yours and may not be specific to your research questions. And if you need help finding a specific article, we can help you track that down. Now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Elliot, who will tell us about how to analyze the articles you find and write your literature review.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So now that we've talked about how to frame your topic and how to start searching our databases, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to do with all of the results that you find. So one of the things that we want to accomplish with our literature review is provide a context for your proposed research or study. Yeah, we can stay here. Yeah. So as Sarah had said, you don't really need to provide an exhaustive look back at the history of your research area in your literature review, but an overview of the research that has come before does help give your reader an understanding of the context of your search. For our sample topic about social media in the workplace, some of the articles that you find in your search describe the current environment in which companies, employees, and social media interact. And there are some titles from article results there on the screen. So in addition to providing context, the literature review also demonstrates why the research that you're going to do is important and timely to the field of study. So here are some other articles that came up in the search. How would these articles demonstrate that your research is going to be important? Based on these titles, it looks like we could learn how companies might be reducing their staff, but at the same time increasing their use of social media platforms. Thinking about that data in the context of some other research that you've done might lead you to take a direction in your paper to argue that it would be helpful to know what type of impact on productivity social media platforms have. So often it's helpful to sort of look at the articles that you find in your search and group them by what they're either saying or what they'll help you say in your research. So the literature review also will clarify the relationship between your proposed study and this previous work that you are examining in the literature review. So examining past research is really the heart of your literature review. You'll answer questions like, what have you learned, or what have we learned as researchers from the work that's been done in this area? And especially, like Sarah said, what unanswered questions that previous research has identified is your study going to attempt to answer. And then in addition to thinking about what as yet unanswered research questions you're going to try and answer, is there anything that you're missing based on your review of the literature? Are there any other gaps where even if a previous article doesn't specifically say this research fails to address, or the next step in research would be to find out this? Can you pick out any missing gaps, or have any questions come up in your reading of the literature that you think, hey, no one has really addressed this aspect of the topic, that's something else that I can add to? So finding out what questions you want to explore is also a way to find the direction for your proposed study. So we've thought about how to outline our research question, find some results, and now it's time to organize and present those results in the form of a literature review. To do this, it's really helpful to keep track of what you've searched and found so far. For some students, the literature review is really the biggest project that you've ever had to do. So keeping your work organized while you're doing this research that we've talked about is going to save you a lot of stress and a lot of headaches later on when you put together your list of sources. And we have a couple of ways that you can keep your citations and sources organized. So one way is to save your search history. Here's a screenshot from the database that we were searching, Business Source Complete. And if you click that little search history with the downward triangle underneath your search boxes, it opens up this panel that shows every search that you have done or tried. This is really helpful if you find some results, keep searching and want to go back to results, but it's also a good way to see what terms you've been searching and how effective those have been. And so when you continue your research over a period of days or weeks, you have sort of a full listing of what you're searching. So write these down, copy paste them into a document, whatever works best for you, but this is something to make note of as you're going along. That way you don't waste time repeating the same searches and the same steps later on. Something else that Business Source Complete and other databases like it provide is you can set up a personal account with a company that gives us the database called EBSCO. If you create an account, it's free for students. You just indicate an email and choose a password, but it allows you to save articles and save those searches. So instead of copy pasting them or writing them down, the database will keep track of them for you. So spend a few minutes to sign in and create an account before you start your research. Another way to keep track of your results is to make sure you always have the complete citation information. Not only will you need this for your works cited bibliography, it will also help you find the article later if for whatever reason you don't save it or can't track it down. We have several different software on your computer that you can use to create these bibliographies. We suggest if you can check out our research guides on Mendeley, which is sort of a software that saves citations and PDFs for the articles when available. Zotero is also a free one that you can get. So as you're browsing, you can save the articles sort of in your browser. So we have a couple of recommendations. It'd be a good thing to ask your librarian what's best for you and your workflow. So now we've done some searching, we've remembered to keep track of the citations and our research, and we've got to now put it all together into a literature review. When organizing your sources, because much of your literature review will be discussing what this research says about your topic, the best way to organize them is by ideas. So instead of going through in a linear or a chronological fashion, starting with the earlier studies, it's better to organize it by ideas and really focus on the big themes or big points that have already been made in the field. We have some examples of how you might do this. So on our research guide for literature reviews, we have some links to sample review matrices, and we'll talk about these, or we'll talk about how to get to that guide at the end of the presentation. But some students find this helpful. So you'll see there on the left column are the major articles or sources that have been found, sort of abbreviated with the author and date. And then along the top we have different topics or themes that have come up in the research. And then in the individual boxes are each quote or idea that comes from each source on that topic. So this is a way to quickly, or not so quickly, get a view of, what are your sources helping you to say? Is a source addressing all different aspects of your topic or only one? You can see the first source, the Taman source, looks like a pretty good one because it talks about all three of these aspects, about negative, positive, and productivity impacts of social media, whereas the other two sources really only focus on the productivity aspect. So this is a way to see where your knowledge gaps are or where you might only have one source that's helping you say something. So maybe it's time to get some additional research. So that's something that you can do. As you write the literature review, once you've gotten your sources and ideas organized, it's always helpful to introduce a major point and then note what those studies have to say about it. This paragraph talks about studies that have found negative aspects of using social media in the workplace. So in red at the top is our main point, and then we follow that up with some supporting information with regard to our sources. And next we show how you can have the opposite effect. If we've already noted negative impacts of social media on productivity, there are some studies we found that talk about positive aspects. So establishing a flow of ideas and again supporting your point with references to your research studies is sort of the pattern that you'll be writing your literature review. Among the possible positive aspects of social media, as noted, is an increase in productivity. Here's just some additional support for that point, including our third optional search term, which was productivity. If you remember, we had started with just social media and the workplace, and productivity was one aspect that we decided to explore. Another thing you can explore is the relationship between your proposed study and previous work, and this is where some studies will identify gaps in knowledge or the next step for future researchers, meaning you. So here's an example of how you might work that into your literature review, because remember, the literature review not only sets up the context of your research, it also explains the sort of persuades your reader why your research is timely and important. So let's end by discussing how to get further assistance and one-on-one help as you work on the literature review. We've been on the library homepage already, library.webster.edu. In the middle is our Contact a Librarian button. So to get help from a librarian, go ahead and click on that. And then on our Contact a Librarian page, there's lots of different ways that you can get help. Our research desk staff is staffed by professional librarians, and they can answer most of your questions and help you get started with research in any area. The toll-free and St. Louis phone numbers are available there. You can call them during library hours. You can also chat with a librarian. That's just below the red box. Our chat is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even if it's the middle of the night and you're stuck on your literature review, use the chat to talk to a librarian, and we can help you find a source you're looking for, or really help you with any other parts of the project as well. All right, and I did say we would return to talk about, I mentioned specifically we have a literature review research guide. So on the main library homepage, we have a Help and Guides button, which if you hover over, gives you some more options. The two links I'd like to point out, especially here, on the left is our training tutorials and webinars. That's where you can access the recording for this webinar and see our other webinars, although you'll get an email with this recording specifically because you signed up, but you can watch ones that you didn't sign up for as well. And then on the right, under All Research Guides, is where we have guides that focus on research in specific areas, finding specific types of information like data, newspapers, images, and also how to do specific assignments like a literature review. And we have a literature review guide that I wanted to point out to you as well. So there's the direct address if you don't want to click your way through to find our literature review guide. It's just libguides.webster.edu/litreview. And then we have a similar guide that would help with this type of assignment as well. It's for our capstone research. So that's libguides.webster.edu/capstone. And that walks you through the similar process of doing research, going from topic to research question to evaluating your sources to putting it all together and organizing it. It's not as focused on the literature review specifically, but certainly most capstone research projects involve a review of the literature, so that could be helpful as well. And then lastly, I want to point out one more resource that will be helpful to you, and that is the Writing Center here at Webster University. Remember, the Writing Center offers a lot of different services to help you with your paper. You can schedule an online tutoring or writing appointment, whether you're in St. Louis in an online program or at one of our extended campuses. Be sure to check out the Writing Center and find out how they can help you put it all together. Well, thank you for spending time with us today. We'll stay on the line for a little while if you have any other questions, and you'll also get a follow-up email from us with a link to our recording from today.